The invisible billionaires, why we're leaving $400 billion on the table. Good evening, everyone. I want to start tonight by introducing you to someone whose work is quietly dismantling the myths we've been told about merit, about opportunity, about who gets to build the future and why. Her name is Cindy Tyler, and she is not just a researcher or an advocate. She is a truth teller, a disruptor, a woman who has spent years peeling back the layers of our economic systems to reveal something we've all been too comfortable ignoring, that the very structures we celebrate as engines of innovation are systematically locking out the most innovative minds among us. And it's costing us not just morally, but economically in ways that should make every single person in this room sit up and demand change. Cindy's work doesn't just document injustice, it exposes opportunity, massive, transformational, economy altering opportunity that we are leaving on the table because we refuse to see it. Her research has illuminated a truth so startling, so counterintuitive, that it challenges everything we think we know about how capitalism works, about who deserves investment, and about what we're really valuing when we decide whose dreams get funded and whose don't. I had the privilege of sitting down with Cindy recently, and what she shared with me, what her work has uncovered through years of relentless digging and unflinching honesty, is something I believe will fundamentally challenge the way you think about entrepreneurship, about economic growth, and about the invisible barriers that are quietly bankrupting our collective future. So let me start with a question. When you think about a successful entrepreneur, what image comes to mind? A young tech founder in a hoodie? A charismatic visionary pitching to a room full of investors? Someone who dropped out of an Ivy League school to chase $1 billion idea? Now, what if I told you that some of the most resilient, innovative, and determined entrepreneurs in North America, people who are launching businesses at rates that outpace nearly every other demographic, people who are creating solutions to problems that affect millions, are receiving less than 1% of the venture capital available to build those dreams? Not because their ideas aren't good enough, not because they lack vision or execution or grit, but because the system we've built, the one we celebrate as a meritocracy, the one we claim rewards the best ideas, simply wasn't designed to see them. Black women entrepreneurs in North America are building businesses faster than almost anyone else. They're launching ventures in healthcare, education, technology, community services. They're solving real problems. They're creating jobs. They're generating wealth. And they're doing it often with almost no institutional support whatsoever. In Canada, Black women founders receive just 0.2% of all venture capital funding. 0.2%. Let me say that again so it really lands. 0.2%. In the United States, the numbers are barely better. And here's where it gets even more staggering. 63% of Black women entrepreneurs have had to invest up to $100,000 of their own money just to get their businesses off the ground. 43% couldn't secure any external funding at all. Think about that for a moment. These women aren't asking for handouts. They're not looking for shortcuts or special treatment. They're building, they're innovating, they're hustling with everything they have. And they're doing it with their own savings, their own credit, their own resources, because the doors that swing open so effortlessly for others remain locked to them. Now, here's where this story takes a turn that should make every economist, every investor, every person who cares about growth and prosperity pay very close attention. We tell ourselves a story about how markets work. We say that capital flows to the best ideas, that investors are rational actors seeking the highest returns, that the cream rises to the top. That's the narrative we've built our entire economic system around. But what if that story is wrong? What if the market isn't actually seeing the best ideas? What if the gatekeepers, the venture capitalists, the angel investors, the loan officers, the people who control access to capital are missing the most profitable opportunities because they're only looking in the places they've always looked? What if they're funding the faces they recognize and ignoring the brilliance they don't? Let me tell you about a study that surveyed over 1,500 Black women founders across Canada. These weren't struggling businesses. These weren't side projects or hobby ventures. These were real, growing, scalable enterprises. And what the researchers found was stunning. These entrepreneurs were building flexible business models that could adapt to changing markets. They were tapping into underserved communities that nobody else was paying attention to. They were creating solutions that addressed real gaps in healthcare, in education, in services that millions of people desperately needed. They were doing all of this without the networks, without the capital, without the infrastructure that their counterparts take for granted. Many of these women launched their businesses not just to make money, but to create generational wealth, to build something that would outlast them, to address needs in their own communities that had been ignored for decades. They did this while balancing family responsibilities, while navigating loan denial rates that were significantly higher than those faced by their white counterparts, while being systematically shut out of professional networks that could have accelerated their growth exponentially. And despite all of that, despite every barrier thrown in their path, they're still building, they're still growing, they're still proving that talent and determination exist everywhere, even when opportunity does not. But here's the part that should make you angry. Here's the part that should make every person who cares about economic growth demand immediate change. If Black women owned businesses in the United States achieved revenue parity with all women owned businesses, it would add $409 billion to the economy every single year. $409 billion. That's not a typo. That's not an exaggeration. That's real money, transformational money, economy altering money, sitting right there waiting to be unlocked. So, why isn't it happening? Why are we leaving $400 billion on the table? Because the barriers aren't just about money, though access to capital is a massive part of the problem. The barriers are about who gets invited into the room where decisions are made. They're about whose face fits the mental image of what success looks like. They're about networks that were built to exclude and systems that were designed to benefit a very specific group of people. Now, let me take you deeper into this. Recent research found that 88% of Black women reported worse economic conditions than they experienced during the height of the global pandemic. 88%. Rising unemployment, federal job cuts, economic instability, all of it hit Black women harder than almost any other demographic. Historically, federal employment has been one of the most reliable pathways for Black women to enter the middle class. Stable income, benefits, security, a foothold in an economy that often felt designed to keep them out. But as those jobs disappear, as economic uncertainty grows, many Black women are turning to entrepreneurship not as a choice, but as a necessity, not because they dreamed of being their own boss, but because there were no other options left. And here's what's remarkable. Here's what should inspire every single one of us. Even in the face of that adversity, even when the ground is shifting beneath their feet, they're finding ways to build. They're pivoting, they're freelancing, they're launching side projects that become full fledged businesses. They're proving again and again that resilience isn't just a buzzword, it's a survival strategy. But here's what I want you to understand: resilience should not have to be the only strategy. Survival mode should not be the default setting for an entire demographic of brilliant, capable, visionary entrepreneurs. Now, let's talk about something that almost never gets discussed in conversations about entrepreneurship: motherhood. If you're a Black woman entrepreneur who is also a mother, the barriers don't just double, they multiply exponentially. Childcare responsibilities, inflexible accelerator programs that assume you have endless free time, networking events scheduled at times that make it impossible to attend if you have children depending on you, pitch competitions that require you to travel with no consideration for the logistics of parenting. All of it creates an additional layer of complexity that most entrepreneurial ecosystems completely ignore. Some co working spaces in Canada have started offering childcare options, and the impact has been immediate and undeniable. Mothers who were previously shut out of networking opportunities, who couldn't attend pitch events or accelerator programs, suddenly have access. Participation goes up, businesses grow, connections are made. It's not complicated, it's just basic infrastructure, but the availability of these spaces is still painfully limited. The support is still inconsistent. And so many Black women who are mothers are building businesses that have to be flexible enough to accommodate parenting, scalable enough to grow without traditional support, and resilient enough to survive on budgets that would make most investors laugh. They're doing it, but imagine, just imagine what they could do with the same resources, the same networks, the same access that everyone else gets. Here's what Cindy Tyler helped me understand, and it's the most important point I want to leave you with tonight. This is not just a story about inequality, it's not just about fairness or justice, though those things matter profoundly. This is a story about missed opportunity on a scale that should terrify anyone who cares about economic growth. When we fail to fund Black women entrepreneurs, we're not just hurting them, we're hurting ourselves. We're missing out on innovation that could transform entire industries. We're missing out on job creation that could lift entire communities. We're missing out on economic growth that would benefit every single person in this room and millions more beyond it. We are leaving $400 billion on the table every year because we refuse to challenge our assumptions about who deserves support and whose ideas are worth funding. And here's the thing that should make you hopeful: the solutions aren't complicated, they don't require us to reinvent capitalism or tear down the entire system. They require us to do what we already know works, but to do it equitably. Increase access to venture capital for Black women founders, create networks that actually include them instead of networks that just talk about inclusion. Offer flexible programming that accommodates the realities of their lives, provide childcare at entrepreneurial events, make loan approval processes transparent and fair, mentor someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't come from your background, who doesn't have access to the networks you take for granted. These aren't radical ideas, they're common sense, but they require us to be uncomfortable. They require us to challenge the systems we benefit from. They require us to admit that maybe, just maybe, the market isn't as efficient as we thought, that maybe the best ideas aren't always getting funded, that maybe we've been leaving brilliance on the table because we've been too comfortable looking in the same places we've always looked. The future of our economy doesn't just depend on the people we've always invested in. It depends on the people we've been overlooking, the ones who are building anyway, despite the odds, the ones who are proving every single day that when you give people a real chance, they don't just succeed, they transform everything around them. Cindy Tyler's work is a call to action. It's a challenge. It's a mirror being held up to every system we've built and every assumption we've made about who deserves opportunity. We have a choice. We can keep doing things the way we've always done them and watch hundreds of billions of dollars in economic potential slip through our fingers. Or we can open the doors, we can fund the ideas, we can build the infrastructure, We can create a system where everyone who has the vision and the drive gets a real shot, not because it's the right thing to do, shot, though it absolutely is, but because it's the smartest economic decision we could possibly make. So here's my challenge to you: don't leave this room and go back to business as usual. Don't nod your head in agreement and then do nothing. Ask yourself, what will I do differently tomorrow because of what I've learned tonight? Will you look at your investment portfolio and ask who's missing? Will you advocate for policy changes that actually level the playing field instead of just talking about it? Will you use your influence, your resources, your networks to remove barriers instead of reinforcing them? Because the truth is this: Black women entrepreneurs are not waiting for permission. They're building right now. They're innovating right now. They're creating the future right now, with or without our support. The only question is, will we be smart enough to join them? Or will we look back in 10 years and realize we missed the greatest economic opportunity of our generation because we were too comfortable, too complacent, too unwilling to challenge the systems that benefit us? $400 billion dollars every year waiting to be unlocked. The invisible billionaires are right in front of us. The only question is, well, when are we finally ready to see them? Thank you.